Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are go. We are go.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC.
A proud member of the Pantheon podcast team.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt, and from the band Motorlord, Ian O'Rourke.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well as we make our way through the spring of 2023. Tonight, we got the whole gang back together. Metal Walt and Ian O'Rourke, we're here to continue our series, The History of Metal. And you know what? This is, we started it almost 2 years ago, and this is the 20th installment. We started in 73, and tonight we're doing 1993. Let's get these guys up on here. Metal Walt, how are you, man? How are things?
Things are great. I brought out some vintage gear for tonight. My Metallica Death Magnetic cap and my Overkill Skull Crusher hockey jersey.
Well, it is hockey season, playoff time, so it's appropriate. Ian O'Rourke, how are you, man? Well, good to see you again.
Doing well. You guys too. I'm glad to be back with the gang. Having a little fun.
So things are good in your world. The band's back playing again. Diesel Don, the drummer. He's off.
Diesel's firing on all cylinders and making a lot of noise. So that's good. We like him that way.
All right. Well, so like I said, the gang's back together. Before we get into 93, just want to remind everyone to get up to our website, sign up for the newsletter, metalmayhemroc.com. The newsletter gives you updates on new podcasts, updates on the radio show. Walt's going to shows every other day, so he's doing reviews. Mark Zagotti's doing his CD reviews. And now that it's spring and summer, I'll be doing reviews. So, again, metalmayhemroc.com and check out some past episodes. All right, Walt, what do we got for tonight? 93. Fuck, we're in the 90s? Are the 80s over? What's going on?
The 80s are over, guys. It's the line in the sand year. It's it. We carried it on for an extra 4 years, but that was it. If there was a crossover year where we said, okay, we can't hold on anymore, this is it, right? And all you got to do is look at the metrics for the top selling albums in 1993. Granted, Aerosmith's Get a Grip landed at the number 3 slot, but after that, there's no more traditional 80s rock bands in the top 50. However, it's the changing of the guard. You got Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Candlebox, Smashing Pumpkins, and Tool all coming in the top 50. This was also the year like Typo Negative. It wasn't their debut, but they were fucking huge. Bloody Kiss was huge this year, and it was the changing the guard. But, you know, you're still at 80s bands, plenty of new releases from some of the 80s acts that we all love. I mean, some okay stuff. A lot of it flew under the radar. We'll touch on some of that. We had all kinds of live albums out in 93, box sets, compilations, live box sets. We got a little bit of everything. So definitely a lot of good material to cover. So what was 93 for you, Ian? There was still some great material in there. Start us off.
Yeah, if I got to pick my top album, I got to go with Edge of Thorns by Sabotage. It was the swan song. You know, Chris Oliva passing, you know, within short time after its release. Probably one of those things that really grabbed me hard before he passed, because I can remember hearing the opening keys playing along, you know, John Oliva with that, you know, and it was a very haunting kind of, you know, melody that comes in and then the riff kicks in, and it sounded different than, you know, what we're used to from Sabotage, but it was part of that evolution that they had. And this was a big album for me. You know, this was probably something that really helped personally anyways, from a writing standpoint, because you could see Chris getting a little bit more progressive with some of the arrangements, you know, that he was working off from with his brother and Paul O'Neill, and the sounds that he was coming up. I mean, his solos were just unreal on this album. They just, took it to a whole other level again. And, he's never played a bad solo as far as I'm concerned, but this was probably my high water mark. There's several of them that are up there, but this would be the first one I would grab.
I second that, Ian. I was a humongous fan of this album, this band, this tour.
Yeah.
I encourage our listeners to go listen to the Zach Stevens recent interview that I conducted for his new release, Arch on Angel. And we spent a good 30 plus minutes dissecting his period in Sabotage. And he talked quite a bit about this era. Listen, he was part of an audition process. There was I think he said something like 75 cassettes sent in. And it was it was Chris's wife who was the one that picked him.
Oh,
not John,
yeah.
not John, not Chris.
Yeah.
And Paul O'Neill almost went through a hazing situation with him where he made him learn every song on Streets, made him drive down from Boston to his apartment in Brooklyn and rehearse the whole album, and then didn't tell him he was in the band officially until after that. So
right.
great album. I second you. I don't want to give away all the secrets, but
Sure.
Go listen to that episode. It's a good one, and you're going to hear a lot more about this album on that one.
Nice.
Vern, 93 for you.
93 for me. Hell, me, I'm the old guy, get off my lawn guy. And, you're right. The line was drawn. Let's see. Let's take a quick dip in some of the older bands. Rush, Counterparts. Now, the band, they spent a lot of time, the previous tours, with Primus as the opening band. And, they made note that when they went into Counterparts, they were making a conscious effort to have a little more spontaneity in their music, get a little more jamming and a little more room for the songs to breathe. And, the first single, Stick It Out, it was a big single. It stayed up on the charts for a while. They had, the instrumental, Leave That Thing Alone. That stayed in the set throughout the rest of their touring career. And Animate, that was a cool song. I didn't mind the Rush. Now, it's not classic Rush, but it was still a little more of that guitar driven,
right.
Like the band was trying to achieve, the breathing.
It had a lot. There was a sound quality to it, right? Roll the Bones had guitars in it, but this one, it came back here, and the tone was great. I mean, you crank up Animate to 11 or 12, and you can hear Neil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then and all the way through, right? Yeah. And tying it back to the beginning, they took Candlebox out on the road for this whole tour as well, right? So that was another one. It was like there were no more Gary Moores and some of these other bands that they went around with in the 80s and 90s, right? It's the changing of the guard. Saw it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Opening night in Pensacola, Florida. Drove down there with my friends.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. Flew down to Atlanta, got in the car, drove 2 hours to Pensacola for opening night. Listen to the sound check outside the hockey arena with the door open. Couldn't get in. Security wouldn't let us in. But listen to it from the outside. I remember they did Double Agent over and over and over.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say this was a return to form of something that was a little closer to some of the 70s into the early 80s vibe, up to like Moving Pictures type Rush. This had a lot of guitar driven oomph. There was a lot more attitude, and you could see this was that period of time, and I know that you guys have seen Rush a shit ton, and that is an actual quantitative measuring term, shit ton.
Shit ton.
When these guys rolling through the 90s, man, they like became a machine with the touring. And like there was not a lot of bands that you could say went up there and delivered like 120% every time they got on stage. They just kept getting better and better and better, and this was such a really good album. And I was very happy that this was more of that return to the rock, so to speak. Roll the Bones was a good album. It wasn't a great album. This was a return to more of a great album kind of sound for them.
As long as I have the mic, 93 for me too. Anthrax. Sound of White Noise. First album, Anthrax had John Bush, last
Love
album with Danny Spitz. And hey, it's 93, the changing of the garden from old Anthrax to new Anthrax. And they were trying to get onto that maybe alternative bandwagon, if you will. Some standout tracks. Only was a killer song. Room for One More. And, John Bush wrote all of this. And it was truly, Bush tracks, if you will. So what do you guys think about it? Ian?
There was a lot about the John Bush era that I loved. No knock against the classic stuff with Joey, because, that has its place. But every album that John Bush did with Anthrax, to me, it's like another level, of the band. They really kind of upped the notch and brought it, especially from a musicality standpoint. You could see where they were still delivering that, that really good thrashy vibe, but now they were adapting, like, Metallica and all these other bands, where they were bringing in that more of a grungy kind of,
it's grungy dark, industrial sound, industrial,
dark, heavy
dissonance, weird. Yes. I mean, they were no longer a one-dimensional thrash band, right?
No.
State of Euphoria, they were still a one-dimensional thrash band. This is like way expanded their horizons. I mean, just look at the delivery of the album, the cover, the weird like noise in that beginning, the Potter's Field thing. Like, you wouldn't have seen that on a Belladonna album. And then you look at a song like Black Lodge, it was slow and kind of melodic and eerie, not a ballad, but definitely not a fast album. Fast song. It was, kind of definitely different.
But then you get a song like High Pro Glow.
Yeah.
And that's got that, you can hear that groove between, Scott Ian and Charlie Benante, with the drums. It's like, get it, did it, did it. Great.
And Room for One More kept them on FM radio. I mean, FM radio was starting its gradual decline.
Yep. And
what was left of, stations that played rock, that was on there. That was a catchy, short, melodic FM song. Bottom line.
Yep. It's great. Great album.
Good tour. I saw one of the first shows they did in the States with John Bush. It was May of 93 at a place called the Grand in New York City. And Gene Simmons walked on stage at the end. And he went behind Scott Ian. He's about 2.5 feet taller than Scott. And he didn't play an instrument. He had a mic, and he just put his arms on his shoulder and stood behind him, and they did She. It was awesome.
Wow.
Fucking killer.
How much did he charge him?
Who opened? Because, I've seen all those tours, but, the years get a little foggy.
That show particularly was a warm-up club gig, like an introduction show, and it was at a really small place. I don't think anybody opened, but as those tours went on, I went and saw all of them. I mean, they had Ministry. At one point, one of the other bands we're going to talk about, they did a co-headlining show.
Who?
Tour.
Who was it?
Well, let's just get onto it. I'm gonna take the mic this time.
Take it.
We're gonna talk about what is my favorite album of 1993, all in all. And that is Fight's War of Words. Guys, this is, it's, pick it out now. It's 30 years ago.
Sure.
The sound quality is amazing. Every song in this album kicks ass. The lyrics he's pissed off. It's all about the world. And, it's funny. I've been reading Rob's latest book. And there was a point in time where he actually goes back and he has regrets about leaving Priest after Painkiller. And he kind of goes back and says, what did I do here? I was at a high point. The band was at a rebirth. Why did I leave? And he mentions how he had to, travel in shitty tour buses and eat crappy food backstage. But listen, for this 2-year period where they toured this and then Small Deadly Space, Into the Pit, into the motherfucking pit. These clubs going crazy. The tour had, he was pulling out deep tracks. Did Green Manalishi, Free Will Burning, and I believe it was Bloodstone. And he was doing a little Sabbath medley. He was doing, I think, NIB and one other track, which those were like the precursors for when he was supposed to collaborate with Tony Iommi on a solo album, which never transpired. But he was in that classic metal.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a trivia question for you guys. One of the members that played on this album has gone on to reinvent himself in the modern day heavy metal world under a different name in a different band. Who is he?
He was in Fight, and he went ahead and changed his name?
Changed his name, and he's in part of a very reputable Spinal Tap-like band.
John 5?
Nope.
Oh, it's dude. Oh God.
Oh,
he's in Steel Panther.
Steel
right?
Panther.
Yep. Satchel.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Rush Parrish, who played the lead guitar on this album, is
right.
Satchel from Steel Panther. So there you have
it. And look at that. That's how far Motley Crue's fallen. That when you said Spinal Tap, I thought of them.
But John, you're not wrong. John 5. Rob Halford collaborated with John 5 on the 2 album, which came out a few years later.
Yep.
I knew there was a connection of some sort.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off your Black Sabbath comment, it was right around this time when Halford did at least one show covering for vocals with Sabbath that I actually picked up the bootleg VHS.
Yep.
By random, just being in a record store. And I was grabbing some CDs and I just happened to look over. I go, what are all these VHS? He goes, oh, those are all bootlegs. And I go, what? And I just happened to look at Black Sabbath came across.
I have those too, Ian. I have them both.
Yep.
I thought that was in 2002 when he filmed it. It was on Ozfest.
Yeah, it's 2. So he did 2 shows in 92. Yep. If you remember, it was the end of the Dehumanizer tour. Yep. And Ozzy was doing the No More farewell, tours. No More Tours ending.
Yeah.
And he invited Sabbath to open, and Dio said, fuck you, I'm not opening for Ozzy under his band name.
Yeah.
So he quit the band. The band was on its way out anyway. Yep. And they asked Rob to step in, and they did like 2 shows, and they did all these deep Ozzy tracks that they would jam out in soundcheck that Rob came in and read off the teleprompter. But John, you're right. There was a early 2000s, mid 2000s, when they were doing one of the Ozfest with Priest, Ozzy got sick, and Bill Ward had to come out and tell the crowd, it was in Camden by me, and say, Rob's singing tonight.
And well, there was KK. We've gone over this before. KK mentioned that in his book, that part of the reason that they got back together was to do that Ozfest for Halford to be the net, because they're waiting for Ozzy to not be able to play sometime.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. What else you got? Ian, you pick one. What do we want to talk about?
Let's talk about Typo Negative with Bloody Kisses. It was huge. It just exploded. And they had, 3-4 singles that were in rock radio rotation, like mad. And this catapulted them to that next level, because before this, they were still doing mostly club shows and these, maybe some festivals and stuff like that. This got them on to bigger tours. They were, I don't remember.
They opened up for Queensryche the year after on the Promised Land
That's
tour.
it. Right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And then catapulting the next year was when I think they jumped on with Pantera. They did that whole thing in 94. They were touring with them. So, I mean, this was huge, and this was good for metal guys like us, because this was some dark, heavy, brooding shit. And
you can't describe Typo Negative sound. It's unique. Only way to say it, right? There's no way to describe their sound.
Yep. It's like part doom, part industrial,
it's gothic.
part goth.
It had a whole set of fans.
Yep.
That
hardcore.
Right. You would go to shows and you would see the start of like the gothic girls that would black out, and it was like it wasn't the 80s anymore, but it wasn't also Pearl Jam, right? They had their own style.
Yep.
And the music was heavy. He had the weird, creepy vocals, but then the end of, what was the song? Christian Woman, right? At the end, it goes out into this almost like Beatles-esque type, overly melodic 2.5 minute.
Yep.
Like, it's really out there stuff.
Yep. And the musicianship, they always made, joke of themselves, that they were not artists and they were, they stunk and everything else. But the self-deprecation aside, these guys were great. The writing and the musicianship was fantastic. And the way that they were able to pull it all together is what made them, like you said, they were totally unique to themselves. There was nobody that sounded like them.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think, when you think of some of these other bands that maybe were starting in this year too, you look at a band like Tool. This was also Tool's debut, Undertow.
Yep.
And again, they within a year or two, they were on the main stage for Ozfest, the beginning of Ozfest. But, a band like Tool, nobody really knew what to make of them at that time, right? But all of a sudden, they snuck in on MTV with the video Sober, with the weird claymation, the kind of disturbing, I can't even describe it, but everybody's seen that video. But again, you knew it was like, man, this is metal, but it's not the metal I'm aware of, but it's good. And it's great musicianship, but it's not Rush and it's not Yes. So what is this? And we don't see the band members. They're not in the videos, right? Who are these guys, right? Bern, did you like Tool at all back in the early days?
Well, according to Ian, I didn't like Typo Negative, and I guess I don't like Tool either. No, it's not that I don't like them. It was, I wasn't really exploring it. It wasn't doing anything for me.
But it was there. That was the point. You didn't have to, you didn't have to experience, but it was around you, right? Sober was on MTV. Sober was on radio. It's still on radio all the time. It's overplayed. Right. But all of a sudden, that's the whole idea of 93. You had all these new kinds of metal creeping in around you. It was very, very different. Right.
Right.
And then, of course, you talk about like the biggies. Right. I mean, we should touch on them just to say, hey, these were now the true new champions of rock. The Pearl Jams and the Nirvanas and the Candleboxes of the world. I mean, they were king of the hill at this point. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but I can't say personally, I don't know how you guys feel about them. I couldn't tell you one song from the next. All I know is that I know songs are played from these albums constantly on FM radio to this day and Sirius XM, but I couldn't tell you what songs they are. Right? Okay. Do you guys like any of these bands?
Okay. Pearl Jam, I thought 10 was great. Fucking loved it. And then this second one, Candlebox,
Overrated.
Yeah. Nirvana, don't even get me started with those fucks. And Smashing Pumpkins, I don't know, that dude was Billy Corgan.
Weird. Like a weird dude, right?
I'm not sitting here, and I don't want to piss anyone off, but personally in 1993, I was dating the girl that I ended up marrying, and she had a young son, and I was at a different place. And I didn't take to the 90s too well. Yeah. By 93, guitar solos were non-existent. Yeah. The bands that I loved so much were just, thrown away. And I just couldn't relate to a lot of this. So if I'm guilty of anything, it's that I didn't give it a fair shake back then.
Sure.
But it was also forced on you too. FM radio forced these four bands on you, right? And you had to make your own judgments. Like whether you liked it or not, you were going to hear these four bands. And I'm like you, John. I was like, I don't know if I should try to like this. And am I uncool if I don't? Because everybody else does.
Well,
I don't,
These bands, I don't know what's going on in the tri-state area, but up here, Rochester radio, these bands were on the Nerve. That was the alternative station. And I never went to it. I stayed on WCMF, Classic Rock, and, CMF. I always joke that stood for Clapton, Miller, Floyd. To this day, if you went in the car right now and turned it on within 15 minutes, I guarantee you'll hear one of those three artists. But so I didn't know they're on the radio, and I wasn't an MTV guy, but bands like Nirvana but I finished college a year before, so I was getting exposed to this because some of the younger kids were playing this. Sure. That's how I got into Pantera. Some of the younger kids were playing that.
Listen, the one thing that we can all agree upon if you notice at this point, at least by 91, 92, you can start to see the shift. But by 93, that dark, quirky kind of thing, like you were describing with Billy Corgan, or even the music of Tool or Typo Negative, all of a sudden something that was totally abrasive, totally not attractive, but enticing at the same time was becoming the new norm.
Yeah.
You had, Manson, with his, shit that he did. All of a sudden now, all of that craziness was the new level of acceptability. And that was something that was okay because, you had the hairspray and spandex, in the late 80s that was kind of gone away. Now this was that whole shift after the flannel revolution that started for 2 years.
And I missed my band.
Yeah.
That music, if you were to like personify it, it was friendly. It was inviting. It was, sure. Maybe it was a little goofy, but it was our music. And I just couldn't relate to what was going on here in the 90s. Like you say, and everyone, and there's nothing against their music, but like a band like Rage Against the Machine, right. They came out and they were power and everything, right. But that wasn't like what we were. I'm not talking about you two. I'm just talking about where I came from.
Sure.
We weren't political and we were about having a good time, and I just couldn't relate. So,
now, John, on that point, you probably don't even think about this, but in this year, 1993, these bands released new albums. Winger, Quiet Riot, Blue Murder, Enough's Enough, Vince Neil, and the Scorpions.
Right. That's
just the hair bands. And then there's, got bands like Accept and others. Sure. So it was out there, but I'm with you. I don't remember. I couldn't tell you what the name of that Scorpions album was.
In 93?
Yeah.
Was it Face the Heat?
See, that's what I mean. Off the top of your head, if this was 4 years ago, you would have known it, right?
Yes.
What's on Face the Heat? I couldn't tell you.
Oh.
No. But I will tell you that Exposed by Vince Neil with Steve Stevens playing guitar was actually, it's almost like a continuation of Motley Crue vibe all the way up through, just with better songwriting, because it's just, it's really a fun album, and Steve Stevens rocks the shit out of it. So he had a good band with him, the people that he had in his lineup at the time, but that was short-lived. It was one of those things. I think it was the big thing was, wasn't it around this time Ford Fairlane, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane came out?
Yeah.
And they had the one song on that soundtrack. And, I don't think we ever, any of us, take our toes completely out of the water we grew up in. But by this point, it was kind of getting harder because there was so much stuff that was floating around. You kind of almost couldn't, it felt good later on to finally be able to fully get back into, hey, let me go back and listen to, Y&T and, Exciter and, all these things that I grew up with that, made the hair on the back of your neck stand up at the time. So.
Ian, did you talk about 80s bands, this Guns N' Roses album?
I didn't mind it.
But it's like covers, right? It's like
Iggy
and the Stooges and what was the other one? Nazareth,
Hair of the Dog.
I enjoyed it just because I was still high on Guns N' Roses to an extent. We had talked about it before, the enamorings of Axl Rose kind of, started to grate on me a little bit, and you had certain songs that went on for 10 minutes of him with the piano and the tinkly. Yeah. This was kind of a little bit of a return to something a little bit more rock, with the way they did the covers. And it was it's actually a pretty decent selection of stuff that kind of encapsulates a lot of where their sound comes from. So that's pretty cool.
That's right. This came out after the Illusions.
Yes.
It's because they didn't have anything else.
Yeah. And and that's what frustrates us about our kind of music, right? The bands we grew up and loved, their discography is 10, 15, 20 albums, right?
Yeah.
GNR, biggest band in the world. What are they, 4, 5?
Yeah.
Even those bands we talked about, okay, Pearl Jam, I'll give them a pass, right? Maybe the Smashing Pumpkins. The Pumpkins were in and out in 10 years, not even.
Yeah.
You know, like Candlebox, what, 3 albums, 4 albums? I don't know, right? Like, no staying power.
No, I know it.
That was that the start of the I don't want to say one hit wonders, but flavor of the month. In the
90s, remember that section in the mid 90s where it was like, and then they were gone. You know,
I mean, we're here to discuss hard rock and heavy metal, but we're not even introducing like that whole side of like, Spin Doctors and
no.
but all those bands got lumped in. So I just by the titles, I couldn't tell if this was a hard rock band or what. The titles, Pearl Jam. Who the fuck names a band Pearl Jam?
Yeah,
but now it's the norm. Our bands always had cool names: Overkill, fucking Sabotage.
Right.
Like fucking Right. Speaking of that,
about what the presidents of the United States of America with Peaches. Remember that stupid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, you know what? Walt has a little section, the M section. Why don't we dig into that? What do you got here?
The M section. Okay. While I come up with the images, I'm going to sing the M song. Mana mana do 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 do. Mana mana do 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 do.
We did this before. What interview did we have that?
We're celebrating our 20th episode.
Yeah.
We can repeat certain things.
Fantastic.
All right. So this here, right? This is, to me, a groundbreaking release. It's Metallica always paving the way, doing something different.
Yep.
And they drop on the fans this box set, which box sets were typically a big giant cardboard thing. But this is literally a road case.
Yeah.
With look at all the stuff in there: VHS tapes,
it was awesome.
CDs, taken from 4 shows in Mexico City, some from San Diego. It's like, I don't know how much this thing was at the time.
I think it was like $50, if I remember. It was like $49.99 or something like that. But it was well worth it. I saw this tour; it was freaking fantastic. The Suicidal Tendencies and Danzig opening the set.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, fucking unreal.
Where'd you see it? Darien Lake?
No, Syracuse at the old, remember in the back of the State Fair, they had the big grandstand.
Oh, okay. Yep. Well, they had, they had like 2 complete shows from the Black Album tour. And then they had the Seattle 89 on Damaged Justice.
Yeah, that's right.
I saw that tour, that 89 with the Cult opening. And I've gone on record saying that's probably one of the best Metallica shows I've ever seen. Not just because, it was because, they're in their prime. They played 2.5, almost 3 hours.
Yep.
They were all over the place with the songs. And
didn't you see him you saw him with Queensryche too, you said was amazing.
Yeah.
I saw that was too.
Yeah, I saw that.
They also were cool because they're like, I hate to say this, but James was like a cool drunk. He's always, pounding beers and cursing there. And I mean, no offense, but like you would never get a title of the album by the band called This Now.
Yeah. Live
Shit, Binge and Purge. That was like, they were just fucking cool. Like, you're like, he was up there, fucking metal hands, like he's too polished now,
Well,
Back then, no, these guys were a fucking dynamo, man.
It was 30 years. Well, that came out 30 years ago. But when you're talking about what were you doing 30 years ago?
I was doing the same thing they were. I got a speeding ticket going to that Metallica show with the Cult opening in March of '89, driving my friend Teddy back from Pennsylvania, and I was afraid we were going to get late and got pulled over by a Pennsylvania state trooper.
Well,
cost me probably $100 at that time.
Well, you should have fucking drove faster.
I remember having a half a bottle or half a 3-liter bottle of Coca-Cola that before I left my parents' house with my buddy to go to the show, I go, hold on 1 second. And I grabbed the Coke bottle off the counter, and there was a freaking bottle of rum that was up in the cabinet. And I went, dumped it in there, put the lid back on. I go, come on, let's go. And I chugged that thing the entire way there. As soon as we got there, I was so fucking drunk. I'm like, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Such a good time.
Yep.
Such a good time.
So you got more M's, Motorhead, Mr. Big, Merciful Fate. Walt, this is your section.
Well,
what do you got?
I mean, I said this in the 1992 episode. This was the era where Motorhead put out an album every 16 months.
Yep.
If you think back, I don't know one to the next.
Yep.
But I saw them on every tour, and they opened up for Black Sabbath for like every tour. But this one, you know, again, one of my favorite songs, Born to Raise Hell. Like,
great.
The fucking song is awesome. I mean, just like, yeah, top. Along with like the Fight album, like that song itself means a lot. You hear it sometimes as like when the PA goes down for a show. I was at a show recently and they played that and I was like, oh my God, that's just a fucking killer song.
Yep.
But that's just Lemmy, man. Just Lemmy, like, you think he cared about Pearl Jam and Nirvana? No, he was writing the same album over and over, putting it out and touring.
Listen, but these guys, Phil and Mickey with him, that was like, we all loved the classic, but like this was like a machine, man. These guys were well crafted, well rehearsed, and they just freaking went, toe to toe with anybody, man. They didn't care. They played everywhere. It was just great material. This is such a fun period for, the 90s with them. They had some really cool stuff that they put out, but behind us in the background there is a favorite of mine, Merciful Fate. Oh my God, Egypt.
Egypt and the Bell Witch. Like
the Bell Witch. Oh God, right? So good. So good. So classic.
And this was their return. I think they were also, they were coming out of like King's really long solo period. And for me personally, I got to see him once, but really? King had laryngitis on this tour, and the show was like not a great show. It was cut short. He couldn't sing. And that's why I was so happy that John and I back in November, we saw him down in Brooklyn. Felt like a redemption. But I remember this album, remember the tour. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. This was great stuff, because it was, what we were, that progression of what we were used to from them. And we had all that great King Diamond material to keep us, fed in between. And they put out this album and it's like, yep, they didn't miss a beat. They were right where they needed to be. And it was the perfect album at the time too, because as we discussed, there wasn't a lot of great metal. There was like this bowl, this punch bowl. And that's where all the great metal sat. This is one of those albums.
I have a question. And that Motorhead, was that was that when they were a 4-piece? Phil Campbell,
I think it might have been Wurzel, a trio by then.
Yeah, I think Wurzel was gone at that point.
What era was it where they were a 4-piece? It wasn't that long.
It was like Eat the Rich and stuff from the the late 80s. It was still Filthy Animal on drums, Wurzel, Phil Campbell, and Lemmy.
But you're right. They dropped to a trio probably shortly after this.
Yeah, Wurzel was, Lemmy likes to party, but he said he was a slop, just a sloppy drunk.
Well, they started as a trio. It was the oddity that they were a 4-piece.
Yes, right. Yep.
They're always a trio.
Yep.
And before we jump off this one, a nod to this Mr. Big album, Bump Ahead. Yep. It's another one that, no memorable songs. It's the third album, but I tend to go see Eric Martin solo all the time when he rolls around Jersey, and he loves this album, man. He does 3, 4, 5 songs off of this every time I see him. Definitely an underrated album. Go back and check it out. Some good stuff on there. Colorado Bulldog and some other things. Vern, I'm throwing this back to you because we're forgetting some things outside of the albums, but talk about the 2 big lead singers who left their bands this year.
Oh, Bruce leaving Maiden.
Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce left Maiden. And who else in 93 left?
Well, Rob Halford.
Yeah, he left. Was it 93 he left, or was it a little earlier?
It was 92 he was officially out, but I guess you could say 93 both bands already had the seeds planted for replacement singers.
Trajectory, yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing with Bruce, he announced it. It wasn't, they had that farewell concert with that magician. Remember that?
Yeah, vaguely, yes.
Yeah.
Now that you say it, now I do.
With David Brain or David Blaine, they had the
David Blaine. Yep.
Yeah, it was a pay-per-view. And well, just in the nick of time, because Maiden, they that year they had those the 3 live ones.
A real live one, a real dead one, and live at Donington. Yeah, great stuff.
Real live one, that was Fear of the Dark tour.
Yep.
And the other one covered all the stuff pre Somewhere in Time. Actually, on paper it looks sick, but it sounds terrible. You ever hear the version of Can I Play with Madness? I don't even know how that got out. But the Live at Donington was awesome because that was originally just a VHS.
Yep.
And then, then they ended up later on releasing that. That became part of their catalog. Adrian was out of the band. Janik was in there. And then Bruce ends up leaving. And then, what's that?
No, I was saying, you're right. And then I took Adrian with him. With a solo band a little bit years later, right? Yeah,
well, he came in. Adrian joined a solo band after he had went solo and did an album or two. And then,
but at least they were putting stuff out this year, right? I mean, you had a couple live albums, 3 live albums. Again, go back to the Metallica concept. How many bands released 3 live albums in 1 year? Didn't happen.
Right.
I mean, you had Kiss Alive 3. I mean, does anybody remember or care about Kiss Alive 3 that was released in 93? I mean, I have it. I have an autographed by Bruce Kulick, too, but
it's a great tour.
Like
great tour.
Yeah, it was a great tour.
I like that a lot better than I like Alive 2.
Yeah. But it's not an album you're going to go back and be like,
no.
Wait a second.
Pull out Alive 3.
What are you talking about, Ian? Kiss Alive 2 was great.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I like the first. I like Alive. I didn't like Alive 2.
Well, all of them are fantasy live albums anyways.
Yeah.
But
Alive 3 was, I like because that was when, Kiss was, dark and brooding and muscular again. They kind of had that oomph after the on the Revenge tour, and that kind of had some balls to it. So that's
when everything's all said and done, I think outside of the Purple Glove era of Crazy Nights, that 80s Kiss is the most legitimate. Just for the fact that the songs and I'm not comparing it to the classic, but I go on record saying, has any band gravy trained 3 years more than Kiss?
Oh, yeah.
Coming to you soon, a rock and roll detention episode. You just named our next topic, John.
Okay, well, we'll have to get on that. But right. Kiss Alive 3. It's all another discussion about you.
What about the Judas Priest Metalworks box set? Plastic, big, thick, and plasticky, right?
Yeah, it was
pretty cool, though.
It was cool, though.
It was just, right? It was a cool album cover, and it was a great set list. It was a great collection of songs. There's nothing really on there that you can't find anywhere else.
Ian, I'm going to share one that might be dear to your heart a little bit.
Sure.
So let's see. We've talked about this one a little bit, but maybe it's time to give it its due process here. Coverdale Page.
Yeah, that was fun.
Right.
Shake My Trees. I mean, it's probably the closest that you're going to get to a Led Zeppelin. Yeah. At the time, because it wasn't until a couple years down the road that he and Plant got back together and did the live
Page Plant thing. Yep.
Page Plant thing. I dug it. I thought it was fun. It had that swagger, and this is something that, everybody kind of, you knew that this was going to be the inevitability because Coverdale had been mimicking Robert Plant for so long, with some of his vocal stylings, that when he finally got a chance to do it, he, let it all fly. So this was fun. It was a cool album.
I don't think it really didn't have any teeth in the States. It was probably really big in Japan from what I remember. Europe,
Europe was big. Yep.
It's funny. I was reading the liner notes before, and there was a funny story on this where they said, The two guys never even met each other ever in the history of all their years in the business. And they agreed to meet to talk in New York City. And they went and met at a hotel. And then when they went for a walk down the street just to get some fresh air, and everybody in public saw both of them, knew who they were, and like the cat was out of the bag. So I could only imagine they were uncomfortable with it. They were probably like, well, shit, maybe we don't even want to work together. But now everybody saw us, so we'll be in Hit Parader.
Hit Parader.
Listen, as long as you're not Jimmy Page's neighbor, you're fine. But if you live next door to him, you can't work with him.
D's. Here's the D's. Double D's, guys. The double D's.
Dio and
Strange Highways,
Purple.
cool album.
So, the Dio band wasn't gone for very long. It was only a hiatus after Dehumanizer. But this one came out in Europe first. It didn't actually come out in the States till the year after. But this one for me was weird because he took over. He brought Vinny back, but he also brought Tracy G and Jimmy Bain from that long-defunct one-album wonder World War III with Mandy Lyons singing. So he brought that again in that, dark, crunching, down-tuned sound that was not Sabbathy. It was something else, very industrial. And it's a weird period for the 3 or 4 albums that Dio put out, and he was a club-level act at that point. I mean, it was great when you got to see him because he was a club-level act. You got to see him up close, but definitely dark lyrics here. Firehead, the title track. Good album. Pain.
He embraced, I think, some of what was going on at the time. Because he, coming from the Sabbath thing, kind of brought him back a little bit into the juju some, and then what was going on around him. But this was a cool album. I dug it. I really did.
It's heavy, really heavy.
Yep. Strange Highways is such a good song. A good song.
Yeah, this is an underrated one in his catalog. I think some of the albums that he put out with Tracy G afterwards, they fell a little bit short, but this one's definitely underrated. Yeah. Now, the Deep Purple, Battle Rages On. I love Deep Purple. You guys know that. This one was a clunker, man. It had a couple good songs, title track, Anya, maybe a few other, Ramshackle Man, but this was like another one of these force Richie Blackmore back in. Ian Gillan hates him. They don't talk. They didn't even get through the tour. If you remember, they had to bring Joe Satriani in at the end of the tour and play the summer dates. It was like, come on, guys,
It's Satriani was like the guy to grab back then. He did stint with Deep Purple and with Mick Jagger.
Yes.
So, I mean, he was all over the freaking place at the time. So kudos to him. Yeah, this one wasn't, it was not a great album by any means, but there was still a couple of songs on there that kind of had some, a little bit more reminiscent of, Perfect Strangers era, and it was all right. But yeah, you could tell that the chemistry wasn't there because of that tension, between the guys.
Truthfully, I think all 3 albums that came out when Richie returned, I don't think any of them are classics. Great songs, individual songs in Perfect Strangers. Oh yeah, House of Blue Light, and on this one, but none of them are like amazing albums. Yeah. We'll get to it in a few years, but Perpendicular that came out in 96 is that's a 10 out of 10, that album.
It's a good album. Yeah, definitely.
Fucking great album.
Yep. Good old Steve Morris, man.
You're all excited.
Vern, we're leaving a couple for you out here, man. It's like the softballs are out there.
All right. We'll get the VH. Aerosmith, Get a Grip.
Yep.
Okay, Ian hates it. He's going to shoot it down. But, I liked it. That had a lot of good stuff on it. Everyone always disses on that. Like, the song Get a Grip, Living on the Edge, Shut Up and Dance. I mean, I liked that Aerosmith.
I think we had a debate about a couple, Permanent Vacation and Pump.
Yeah.
And you really could throw this one in here. Yeah, if I had to say 1, 2, 3, this is number 3, but it's not as good as the other 2. It's too many ballads, but look at the ballads. Amazing, Crazy, and
Crying.
But those ballads are really good.
I know, but they were overplayed, and
Shut Up and Dance was fun.
Yeah,
Shut
Eat the
Up
Rich
Dance
was a good song.
Eat the Rich
but-
was good. Get a Grip was all right.
Here, I got a little trivia for you guys.
Yeah.
On this album, they had additional support from Desmond Child, Don Henley, Lenny Kravitz, and they had a guy by the name of John Webster play keyboards. What other 1993 album that we discussed did John Webster have a keyboard appearance on their album?
I have no idea, actually.
Rush, Counterparts.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah. And I did a little research with this John Webster. Dude has one hell of a career. And
Oh, I'm sure.
yeah, the list of shit he's on. So just
Hit him up, man. Hit him up.
Yeah.
Let's get him on.
As we tape this, they just announced Aerosmith with their Peace Out tour, and I'm going to take it in because I like Aerosmith and I would pay to go see them again. And then, when you have the Black Crowes, why
They're
not?
playing down by me at Newark Hockey Arena in between Christmas and New Year's, which is a good one. Nobody ever tours then.
Yeah,
That's a cool in between.
they're playing Buffalo in mid-January. That should be fun. Okay, so Aerosmith, Get a Grip, and Van Halen live right here, right now. At the time, it was
I fell in love with it later.
It was
Pleasure
Van
for me.
Halen. Listen, Van Halen was huge.
Yeah.
They had to take a break after pumping out 3 studio albums in a row in a matter of not even 10 years. Right?
Spanked.
They put this out. It's like, the year before they had Alice in Chains as support. They're
Sure.
playing 2-3 nights at all the hockey arenas. I mean, this again, it's like the period of the live albums where you were really excited to go get this. Fucking killer album cover. Like, look at that. What is that? Tornado Hits.
Yep.
One
House
Standing.
Yeah, I just heard an interview or read an interview or something. It started, Eddie had to do some touch-ups, and then he did so much touch-ups that Sammy had to go in and redo something, which led to the album being just completely worked over. At least it's the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour, and you're getting Judgment Day and Pound Cake.
I was going to say.
And,
Pleasure Dome.
Pleasure Dome, yeah.
Spanked.
What else is on my list?
And there were a couple others maybe worth calling out. Going back to the new wave of rock, what do you want to call them? I mean, not a fan, but the band Life of Agony. They were another one you couldn't pigeonhole. I mean, if you couldn't pigeonhole where to put Typo Negative, you definitely couldn't. You couldn't put Life of Agony anywhere. But that River Runs Red album, fans loved it, and I remember Anthrax got really close to those guys. I mean, just Ian, were you into that at all?
Yeah, because they were friends with the Type O guys. It's crazy, that New York relationship, Biohazard, the dude worked out with Peter Steele in the gym, so they all played shows together, because they remembered him from the Carnivore days, when he was doing the hardcore thrash crossover stuff. Life of Agony is a cool band. Life of Agony, the band that reminds me of early Life of Agony when they came out was actually Volbeat.
Yeah.
They kind of
I
got
can see
that same kind of, it's darker, the vocal styling that they have and the way that they kind of do their melodicism is really similar. I dug it. Another one that I'm going to shout out there that, you guys, may or may not know, I hope you do. Cathedral put out the Ethereal Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody that are fans of doom metal, Cathedral are one of the top dogs forever, and they kick ass on this album. It is such a great album. It's always been one of those personal favorites of mine. And the one single that they had off it was Midnight Mountain, and it's the most probably mainstreamish sounding song that you'll ever hear Cathedral do in their life. So it's a great album.
That's cool. Listen, technical thing. We only got 3 minutes left, and then the SD card's gonna end. A couple quick points. Udo rejoins Accept for a album and European tour for that Objection Overruled. Let's see. Besides Bruce and Rob leaving, Michael Kiske of Halloween, he took off.
Yep,
and
that's right.
Alex Skolnick and Louis Clement of Testament, they're out. Unfortunately, Alex took the place of the deceased Chris Olivia, who passed away in that car accident in 93. Yep. So people are coming and going. And Living Color came out with Stain. You know, if you're talking about, that's the only other band I had on here that remotely was under my interest.
Overkill put out I Hear Black, which again, it's like in the Motorhead camp. It's like Overkill came out with an album every other year.
Sure.
I got them all on CD. Another underground one that I think is worth a shout was Monster Magnet, Jersey Boys, Super Judge. Got some really cool trippy, trippy songs on there, trippy heavy songs.
Love those guys.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
The other one, Sex and Religion by Steve Vai. It was freaking great. Devin Townsend getting introduced to the world, strapping young lad, all of the Devin Townsend project. It's a cool, different album, and Vai just rips. You know, when they were saying, "Hey, don't play guitar solos," he was like, "I'm Steve Vai."
Well, what do we got for 94?
I mean, 94, you know, you're going to still see a lot of these bands popping up here. I think, you know, Pearl Jam is at the top of the world by then. Of course, you have the Kurt Cobain Suicide. And then you see like a band like Korn comes out with their debut, and it's like the start of new metal, which will cover a lot of, but still a lot of good releases. So, I think, 93 was fun. I had great memories in 93. I mean, even some other things outside of the releases, I was able to catch Emerson, Lake and Palmer at Radio City Music Hall on their reunion tour. Nice. I was able to catch Brian May at the Beacon Theater on the Back to the Light tour. I mean, he got out on the road a year after Freddie passed, and he had Neil Murray and Cozy Powell out there on him. It was a fucking killer show. And, Lollapalooza, there was also the shift that year where they had Primus and Alice in Chains headlining. So it was a little bit more of a rock act. So lots of good memories in 93 for me, guys. All
right, we got to get out of here. So, Ian, nice seeing you. Metal Walt.
You guys, too.
Always nice seeing you. And listeners, get up to that Metal Mayhem ROC website. Check out some past episodes. And, Ian, what do we always tell our listeners to?
Keep it heavy.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.